Now, you have very intensively explained how heterogeneous Islam is. And there's not one Islam, there are schools and different thinkers, and nearly the whole spectrum of ideas and thinking that we have in the West can be found in the Islam too. But if we see the Islam from our perspective as being the European perspective, we still have the feeling, at least many of us, that although they are definitely very different as we all are, when it comes to the clash between Islam and modern Western world, they all have a very strong feeling of solidarity. And they easily forget about the differences when the confrontation with the modern Western world comes into play. And that's not a reproach. We easily can understand that, because you have mentioned that the greatest fear is the recolonization by the West and the loss of their own identity. They have the fear to be alienated from themselves. But again, this is no reproach, because we have the same feeling if we see the situation from their side. Our greatest fear in the West is to become, to lose our own basis of culture and thinking of religion, to become Islamized, or how you would call that. And so they have the same feeling. So it's a clash of two cultures which are very difficult to reconcile. And so, although you have stressed all the differences between the Islamic culture, in the end, there are two blocks and two ways of thinking which are confronted with each other. As again you said, formerly the communist East and the Western world. And it's your thesis that the Western world, after it has lost its favorite enemy, they quickly had to build up a new enemy in order to keep the West, to preserve the coherence of the West. I don't know if this is just a theory or if it's true. Sure. But I have to admit that myself is a little bit irritated. I know the writings of Muslim authors, that they are open and liberal and see the differences and the advantage of Western thinking. But I'm afraid whenever Western interests are at stake, they build a closed front and put solidarity among the Muslims above the common ideas and common values between Muslims and Western modern people. And if I might add a quite different point, and then I stop for the rest of the evening. You have been talking about Muslims and modernity, but we in the West are not talking about modernity anymore. We are, since 2 decades, in the postmodern era, and there's already some talking that the postmodern era is part of the past and we are moving to something new which we cannot define yet. So they struggle about moving into something which is our past. And what is your view about our actual social and political situation, which is something behind postmodernism, and the attitude of the Muslims, which have problems with a position we had 50 years ago?
I'd like to say something about what you said at the beginning of this. It's we're a bloc against invasion of the culture of the West. But it was not exactly like that. I mean that they tried to, the Ottoman Empire did what it could do to become as Europe was at that time, from the beginning of the 19th century, to modernize itself from the technological point of view, for example. And this did Egypt at the same age, but at that time, Britain halted the modernization of Egypt for political reasons, of course. And Arabic countries experimented not modernity from the West, but colonialism from the West. And colonialism was not Democrat. They didn't experience the democracy by the West, never. They experienced something else. So from where could pass experience of democracy in those countries? So they didn't experience democracy after colonialism also. So the experience of the West is not just the culture of the West, it's the politics of the West that the West did in these countries. So...
Well, your first question was about solidarity. And I dare to doubt whether there is a real solidarity between Muslim countries. I think that's only in the ideological field that they pay lip service, that because they all belong to the Islamic community, they have to form a bloc against the West. But as you know, Turkey really wants to become a member of the European Union, but the European Union keeps Turkey out. Morocco also wants to become a member of the European Union, but the European Union keeps Morocco out. So they really have the feeling, a lot of those so-called Islamic countries, that the West is measuring in an ambivalent way. So that with regard to solidarity, and as you know, for example, Pakistan changes its attitude to the West every now and then, and it changes its solidarity with the other Islamic countries also every now and then. And you know that Jordania and Egypt, and in fact Saudi Arabia also, they are the closest allies of the Western world. So, but only in the field of ideology, they are really taking a stance against the West. For your second question about this image of the enemies, you really can show the turn in history after the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989. You hear the Club of Rome, and David King, the chairman of the Club of Rome, he said, well, where I'm really concerned about is this progress of Islam in the world. And then, and history is repeating itself, then you got Dan Quayle, the then vice president under George Bush I, who said on a Republican convent in 1991, the 20th century knows three evils. It's Nazism, communism, and Islam. And of course, as Europeans, we couldn't stay behind, and Willy Klaas, our Secretary General of the NATO at that time, he said, well, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, our new enemy is Islam and Islamic fundamentalism. Although he regretted this statement, he publicly said it. So you can see right from the fall of the Berlin Wall a creation of an image of an enemy. And if you study the different countries, you see a change in language. For example, in the Netherlands, in the 60s, we were talking about Moroccans and Turks as guest workers. Then, when the families were reunited, we were talking about working immigrants. And then, in the 80s, we started to talk about them as members of cultural minorities. And then after the fall of the Berlin Wall, they were suddenly called all Muslims. We didn't use the other words any longer. So in a way, we created a bit of our own problems. And the third point, I think the fact that we already passed the stadium of modernity and even the stadium of postmodernity is for many a Muslim a proof that it's a good thing not to follow all those Western concepts and all those Western ideologies, because they all fail. And they are very often claiming that we tried democracy, we tried socialism, we tried everything Western. But at the end, the Islamic world only became more corrupt, more tyrannic. So now we should give Islam a try. It's a very simple way of thinking, like in the West, in the Western debate, is also a simple way of thinking. But maybe it's a little bit of a response to what you remarked.
Just one sentence, you could say, the Islam and the Western world, we need each other as the other, as the counter picture to preserve our own unity and identity. And if the other would not be there anymore, we would fall apart. And that's true for our side, and it's true for the Islam side. So they need us, and we need them.